Hello, everybody, and thanks very much for joining the Ultima monthly licensing webinar all around this month, the Microsoft software assurance and what that means in a modern cloud environment. My name is Ian Gerard. I'm one of the Microsoft licensing specialists at Ultima, and you can see my contact details on the screen there. As always, this webinar will be recorded, and the slides are going to be made available or are going to be obviously made available to you afterwards as well. And I will say that the idea around this webinar is some of those subjects I've been speaking to customers about and Microsoft have been talking about, any new releases, any changes over the last 30 to 60 days. So today I wanted to talk, and we're going to be focusing on software assurance. Obviously something that's been around with, since day dot with Microsoft, and has kind of changed and kind of changes every year. Microsoft make additions, they retire certain benefits, they add new ones in. So what we're going to be doing is we'll run through what some of those changes are and when they happened. I'm often getting asked, oh, do we still have this program or this benefit? So we'll run through all of that. And then we'll kind of have a look at the specific benefits directly in relation to a more of a modern cloud environment. So, well, actually, you do still have benefits for on-premise, but more and more the value is found in the hybrid use benefits, or how you intend to use those licenses in either a hosted environment or using Azure or another cloud environment. So I will be kind of running through all of that. As always, there's an opportunity for you to ask questions. Please do. I will kind of try and cover off the questions at the end. Ultimately, you may decide, because a lot of this is going to be relatively high level-ish, so you might start to interpret this and start wondering how it's going to specifically affect you, your organization, and your users. So you're more than happy to deliver this in a direct session, or of course contact your Ultima account manager or your aligned specialist. But like I say, my contact details are there, so feel free to come directly to myself, and hopefully we can kind of cover off the main beats in this webinar, as I say. So let's start by kind of going back to the past a little bit, which is a relatively logical place to start, he says, in regards to the software assurance benefits and the history, and what was kind of included within the within software assurance, kind of in before the cloud world. It was kind of broken down into 6 different categories. You can kind of see them there. I'm not going to go through every one. Some of them remain to this day, but what we'll do is we'll run through the potted history. Certainly some had more value than others. Traditionally that home use program back from January 2010, and then there was things like the TechNet support, the package services days, planning services days, those training vouchers for external training, as well as all your general benefits, such as your new version rights with the software that you buy software assurance on, being able to spread those payments. Software assurance lasts for 3 years, so a benefit was being able to spread those payments. But as we've kind of moved through each year, Microsoft have added, and like I say, they have retired benefits as well. Some of them have left and then come back in again, and you can see right back from January 2011, Microsoft did start to introduce the office roaming rights, again almost as a acknowledgement that actually a user wasn't necessarily just sitting down at his desktop and using that 24/7. The fact that they did need to have access from third party, you do need to have access potentially from third party devices, from home devices, to start showing that user is becoming far more mobile. And I will kind of cover off what all of these benefits are as well, if anything's kind of unclear. But as we run through this, we can see then in January, by January 2012, we'd seen that employee purchase program retired, which was the ability, back in the day, to kind of buy Office at a 90% discount, that volume license, that on-premise version of Office. And again, we can see for the added benefits, more aligned to the user being more mobile with the introduction of license mobility. So like I say, you will get copies of all these slides, and you can see all these various benefits over the years coming in, whether it was the unlimited virtualization, or again, more of those mobile, making the user more mobile. Whereas actually what Microsoft then tended to retire, or have been tending to retire, is some of the support structures around that. For example, things like the TechNet Plus Direct went around circa January 2015, and ultimately hasn't really been replaced. Whereas the benefits being added in are absolutely the things which organisations are utilising fully, like the DR rights and the failover server rights. They weren't originally part of the software assurance benefits, whereas now they're pretty integral to allow that passive failover instance if that's the setup that you have. And again, being able to introduce things like receiving a copy of Office Online, the Office web apps, that lighter version of Office, and your email that people could access potentially from a mobile device. Again, the idea around the users becoming more mobile, and software assurance kind of adapting to that. Kind of going back into the recent history now, again, we're seeing that hotfix support being removed, the training elements potentially being retired, or alternates being, but again, the benefits being loaded up, being access to the Power BI, some cloud services, being able to run acknowledgement that you may have a Windows or a Linux machine. So again, making that user more flexible and more mobile. Kind of coming into January 2019, sees the major introduction of the Azure hybrid use benefit across SQL. And even back in 2020, we've seen that extended just more and more in regards to those hybrid and DR and VDA use rights, all accessing that. And this kind of brings us up to last year, where there was, January, I say last year, it's actually the start of January 2021 wasn't the major changes. We had the added benefits coming in again with the extended hybrid use rights, but the retired benefits being an element of Windows to Go, although there are still Windows to Go services as part of the software assurance benefits today. But as of January this year, the retired benefits, which actually happened in June of 2021, a couple of major ones, which was the retirement of the training vouchers, the external training vouchers, and also of those planning services days. The training vouchers was, again, using people like Global Knowledge and QA for that external expert training, getting the Microsoft certifications for that technical offsite training. Obviously, through lockdown, they have offered a variety of remote courses, but whereas with your software assurance, you'd be allocated a number, or you would receive a number of training vouchers that has retired as of June 2021. I think if you'd redeem the voucher, you could actually utilize them and complete the training or the planning services day up to the end of the 31st of December last year. So they're very much retired now. Planning services days, again, was the paid for consultancy by Microsoft to explore the deployment of new products within your organization, whether that's a desktop or server type product. Look, so we still have organizations asking for training, of course, and we Ultima do have an end user training platform with bite-sized training on how to use, the latest email, how to get to grips with Teams conferencing, or you want to learn more about Power Automation, everything and anything in between. But this retired benefit of the training vouchers for the external training, that we do still work with QA and Global Knowledge and all of the major trainers, and they do give us preferential rates. So please do contact us and we can kind of send you through what those kind of rates are. But the fact is, it is a paid for, they're no longer free. And it's probably a good point to just review where we are today in March 2022. So where does that leave us? What are the software assurance benefits today? And some of them, like I say, have stayed with us throughout the years, which makes a lot of sense. These are the new version rights, and don't discount this. Software assurance lasts for 3 years. So if you are buying a volume license with software assurance, if there's a new product released in that next 36-month term, you get the rights to that license. You get, if it's a perpetual license that you've bought as well, then you own that in perpetuality, even if you don't actually deploy it within that 36-month term. The most latest version available when the software assurance expires is the version that you are eligible for. So you might still be running Windows Server 2012 for all, 2016, but you've got active software assurance for the variety of other benefits. We don't actually deploy or roll out 2019 or later version, but that's okay, even if you let that software assurance expire, which you probably shouldn't, but if you do, you do still get the rights to the latest server as of the point of those software assurance expiring. Spread payments, I mentioned it briefly, and I don't want to, it's pretty obvious, but that's just annualize the payment of software assurance. Obviously, it's 0% finance. And you will see that the reintroduction of the home use program, which I will come on to because a lot of people do ask about that. It was the employee purchase program that left around early 2010s, and then it has come back in again in a slightly different flavor. So we'll run through that. And we're certainly going to be running through in the next slides around the hybrid use benefit, and really what that what that is and what the benefit is in regards to SQL and Windows Server. I think it's always kind of important to understand some of the Microsoft terminology, that the benefit, but you're not quite sure whether it falls under, well, what is license mobility? What is DR rights? What's the difference between DR rights and failover rights? And all of these types of questions. So let's just run through those now quickly. If we look at the deployment side, and if we look at license mobility and what license mobility is basically being able to deploy server applications on premise or in the cloud, as long as in an authorized hosting partner's data center. So then that could be Oracle, that could be Microsoft, it could be one of the third-party hosting organizations out there, as long as it's an authorized data center. And if you have software assurance on those server licenses, you can effectively run that server in the cloud or on an authorized person's data center. Then we would look at something like the manage and support. Obviously 24/7 problem resolution support is still there. It was one of the only support structures left within software assurance. The difference between disaster recovery and failover rights, again, I know the vast majority of this already know this, but DR obviously being where you can have the licenses for the backup servers, so it kind of permits all of your patching and your testing, and then your failover rights. That's the benefit that allows that passive failover instance, non-production basically, so you can kind of run that on a licensed server or on any other server, to be fair, in anticipation of failover. So that's the kind of the difference between those two. The roaming rights, office roaming rights. So yeah, that's basically allowing users to remotely access Office, Project, or Visio, any of those kind of applications, via a virtual desktop from a third-party device. So if whether it's a training device, shared device, partner's device, you're on site, you're at home, any kind of third-party device, that's what office roaming rights is. It's similar to Windows to go rights, which is this idea where you get a fully manageable corporate desktop running Windows 10 Enterprise. To be fair, it has to be a Windows 10 Enterprise edition, but it's on like a bootable USB stick, so you can effectively run that on any licensed device, or any licensed user can run that on any device that they have. So again, all really regarding that, making that user more mobile. I wanted to call out the home use program because it has slightly changed, whereas before I mentioned kind of leading up to, when the old employee purchase program, which was retired around 2014, was the 90% discount. Today, the home use program is the ability to get about a 30% discount on Microsoft 365 kind of family and personal copies, home and personal editions. And you need to basically have SAM coverage across the applications pool, or an organization buy more than 2,000 of the kind of E3, E5 licenses through any program. So you'll notice that one isn't necessarily to do with software assurance. It's actually kind of subscribing to that cloud license. So there's probably a clarification there, was, as previously, if you just had an office volume license and had that with software assurance, employees using those licensed devices could quite simply go and purchase that, their own kind of copy of Office for the Home or Professional Plus. Now, today, you've got these minimum requirements of needing to buy actually over 2,000, and it needs to be in the cloud suite to get that home use program. So therefore, the only way to get it via software assurance would be those covered with the SAM coverage on the full applications pool. So it's some quite significant changes, important kind of differentials, differentials, nice word, differences between them. Moving on to software, this is some area where lots of organizations focus, which is around software assurance on SQL. And I did just very first and foremost want to call out the difference between buying a traditional SQL license, on an enterprise agreement or an MPSA agreement, and like an open agreement, even though they're retired, but you buy a SQL, I've chosen enterprise just for this instance where you buy it with software assurance. You get a lot of the rights that we've already kind of mentioned in regards to the new version rights and being able to spread the payments, DR rights, that license mobility piece is probably the main difference here. If you look at against, buying a SQL license with software assurance on a volume license agreement to a server subscription for SQL Server bought through a CSP, which is like it's got many of the same features as software assurance, but it's not software assurance. It's got, as you can see, in a direct like-for-like comparison, there really are a lot of similarities, but there's a significant one that has been removed, which is, if you're buying your SQL licenses as a subscription through a CSP agreement, then you do not get the license mobility through software assurance. And that license mobility is the ability to then move that SQL server to a third party, an authorized third party hosting partner. Okay, so you can't, this is Microsoft's way of basically saying, if you have SQL with active software assurance in that traditional model, you could move that SQL server to Oracle if you wanted to. You could move it to a third party hosting environment if you wanted to. If you buy it through a CSP, you cannot do that. You cannot, Microsoft don't recognize license mobility through software assurance and CSP, which basically means you could only host that server within Azure. It doesn't allow you to run it in Oracle or on any kind of third-party hosting partner's data center. So that's a real significant difference, and why I spent a little bit of time kind of running through that, because there have been organizations who've purchased or moved their SQL licensing to CSP, assuming that they could then still move that SQL server to a third-party hosting, to Oracle, to here, there, or everywhere, like you could with software assurance, and you cannot. You can't do that on CSP. And obviously, with the cost of SQL Server, it's a real significant point to make that. So, so probably one of the main reasons why I wanted to do the webinar around this subject as well. So that Azure hybrid use benefit does cover both SQL Server and Windows Server. And like I say, there is a difference between when it comes to eligibility. If you've got a CSP agreement, you do still get the Azure hybrid use benefit. What I was talking about, license mobility through software assurance to Oracle or third parties, is something else. You do get the Azure hybrid use benefit via CSP on both Windows Server and SQL Server. It's kind of included in the 1 year or the 3 year subscription offers for both. And as you can see, when it comes to Windows Server, you can use those on premise, or you can use them in a virtual server, or you can use them in servers running on Azure. When it comes to the SQL side, absolutely the same. You can run that on premise in your on-premise environment, your own virtual servers, physical servers, or you could do those VMs running in Azure or on the SQL database or even the data factory. Again, all within the Azure model there. And it's worth noting that, yeah, this can save you up to 49%. If you have a license with Azure hybrid benefit, on the SQL side, you can kind of see you're up to 49%, as well as on the Windows Server side. And you'll see when you go to enable the Azure hybrid use benefit on the virtual machine creation, there's simply a box that you can tick. Or even if it's one they're already running, you might realize, well, actually, we're even doing this ourselves. So you want to analyze your own environment to see whether you're utilizing the Azure benefit that you already have. So again, it's a relatively pretty straightforward process of ensuring you tick the box. Again, Microsoft licensing generally is a trust-based system. So it's not like Microsoft are going to come in and check all your working here, but obviously you should remain compliant. And this is why you obviously speak to your licensing specialists to help you with this piece. When it comes to Windows Server with software assurance, let's focus a little bit also on what you can do on premise as well, because we mentioned with Windows Server, you've got that hybrid use benefit. It's relatively straightforward to take advantage of that. And then alongside SQL, you can kind of start saving 50, 60, 70% on your Azure virtual machines. But you also have an on-premise estate, which is going to be running Windows Server as well. You've got two editions of Windows Server. You have Standard Edition and you have Data Center Edition. Let's say you've got both, with both covered with software assurance. With Standard Edition, you effectively use it on-premise or in the cloud, one or the other. Yeah, okay, if you're doing a migration, there is a dual use of around 180 days, but effectively you are going to be really using your Windows Server standard licenses to cover your on-premise estate, or you activate the hybrid use benefit to cover the servers running in Azure or Oracle, to be fair. With Data Center Edition, the dual use rights allows you to still use that license on premise. So you can take your data center licenses per core and you can cover your on-premise servers with Windows Server Data Center, and that will provide you with full license mobility, unlimited virtual VMs on premise, as well as then being able to utilize the Azure hybrid use benefit as well. Now, one thing I haven't put on these slides is that conversion, and it's a like for like. The minimum is 16 cores. So if you have a 16-core license on premise, that will cover those 16 cores within Azure as well. So although on-premise Data Center gives you unlimited VMs, the only way to get that within Azure is actually if you were to allocate the Windows Server Data Center licenses for all of your physical cores available to you on that Azure server. So that's really the software assurance piece, which is, as you can see, does extend to the users, to the service, to the hybrid use benefit, to spread payments. And like I say, you might want to analyze your own users and your own server estate to understand your own scenarios as well. Then I wanted to come on to, again, another subject, which is just around Microsoft 365 E5 security. So when we talk about Microsoft 365 E5 security, one of the first things that there's an assumption is, it's Defender. And that's certainly the case. Microsoft's security offering really has been rebranded to Defender. We've seen things like MCAS be rebranded to Defender over the last 12 months. And you've got Microsoft Defender for endpoint. You've got Microsoft Defender 365 identity, as well as cloud apps. When you see those, at the top, you'll see blue boxes and green boxes. Blue boxes basically mean you can buy that license as an individual component. And if you see a green box, it's a step up. So it needs to be, there needs to be a license backing it up, if you like. But effectively, yeah, Microsoft's Defender is their security offering. It is their unified pre and post breach enterprise defense suite. So each element of it does detect different, things, investigate attacks, prevents harmful activities automatically. That's the concept behind Defender. And what I've done here is it's been broken down into, well, Defender for endpoint is obviously aligned to that Windows 10 piece. So you could choose at the bottom there to buy Windows 10 Enterprise E5. That includes it. But effectively within that, that's basically Windows Defender for Endpoint Plan 2. Similarly, you could buy the Enterprise Mobility and Security Suite. So these are the kind of control tools around your users. And E5 does include lots of things, but it also includes, yeah, absolutely, Defender for Cloud Apps and Defender for Identity. So you could choose to purchase EMS E5, or you could just buy those Defender products as individual components. And then finally, on the Office 365 side, you could buy Office 365 E5, or you could buy a step up, because it's a green box, a step up to Defender for 365 Plan 2. And actually within 365 E5, that does include Cloud App Security on 365, which isn't actually available as an individual component in any which way. So you can see how that's kind of broken down, but there is a significant other addition for security, and this is the tools to manage Defender. So we're talking specifically around Azure Active Directory Premium, Azure Information Protection, and Intune as well. So these, again, kind of those control tools around the Enterprise Mobility Suite, but you would need to have them to manage those security packages, whether it was, Defender for 365, protecting against malicious threats and emails and links, well, you'd need to align that to Azure AD so that actually it's allayed to the right users. So then, if we add those into this same diagram, actually Microsoft Intune, Information Protection, and AD Premium Plan 2 is all kind of part of that E5 suite. But if you wanted to get the Microsoft security package, you wouldn't necessarily buy EMS E5, because actually you're still missing Defender for 365 and Defender for Endpoint, which is why Microsoft have basically introduced this, which is Microsoft 365 E5 security. So you go across the plans. Now, don't get me wrong, Intune is actually part of E3. And as we can see, the license for E5 security is a green box, which means it's a add-on, it's a step-on license. So to get E5 security, you actually need to have E3. You need to have Office 365 M365 E3, because then you can step up the E3. It includes the step up to Defender, and so all of this is and then that includes kind of Intune and Information Protection Plan 1 in E3. But as you can see, that's what E5 security is. It's across the panel, so it gives you those security tools plus AD Premium, so you can actually use it. But then there's obviously organizations out there who would potentially need some of the governance, need some of the e-discovery, need some of those compliance tools. So whereas Microsoft have introduced Microsoft 365 E5 security, they've also introduced things like information protection and governance, risk management, e-discovery and audit, which kind of fit into the on the workspace side. Elements of information protection and governance include MCAS as well, or Defender for Cloud Apps. So it quickly grows. You can see again the green box is that add-on license, the blue box is the standalone license. So it's a little bit convoluted, but there really is the right solution out there for your organization. So let's say you are on that on the left-hand side, you do have Microsoft 365 E3. And you're looking at the big cost, the big step in doubling the price to Microsoft 365 E5. So you're thinking, well, what's the additional benefits? What's the additional stuff that we're getting with that? You can see, well, actually, it's Power BI Pro. It's the Teams Phone and Teams Conferencing. And then it's those two significant elements. It's the E5 compliance and it's the E5 security. And as we've just run through, actually, E5 compliance is the information protection, e-discovery, and cyber risk management element. And the E5 security is basically the full Defender suite with the control tools of AD Premium as well. So that's what the difference is between E3, E5, and where you'd actually see where the E5 security fits in and what it is. And again, look, it's a green box, so it's reliant on the E3 at the bottom. It's an add-on. You can only buy those green boxes by having the E3 license at the bottom there. Whereas actually you can buy Power BI Pro, just, you know, that's actually as a 100% standalone. I will just cover off the last few updates, mainly being regarding the extended support. For those who haven't seen it, SQL 2012 does come to the end of support on the 12th of July this year, and therefore there will be extended support available to buy from that date. For those who aren't aware, you know, currently SQL Server 2008, as well as Windows Server 2008 is in extended support. By the way, Windows Server 2012 doesn't go into extended support until October the 10th, 2023, but it's very expensive because you need to have active software assurance on your current licenses, but then you need to buy the extended support every year that it is available. You need to license it per core, and effectively the support is the same cost as a license. And not only that, it's cumulative. The updates, the patches are cumulative, so even if you need to buy support in later years, you still have to buy the preceding years to get all of those cumulative support. So extended support is expensive, but as confirmed, it is going to be available from the 12th of July 2022 for SQL Server 2012. Microsoft have also literally, hot off the press, just announced the general availability as pay-as-you-go options for Power Apps. So for those who are looking at Power Apps, traditionally you always kind of license it per user or per app. You know, if it's per user, get access to any number of apps, or if it's just one application with unlimited users, whichever kind of works out the best commercially for your organization. But both of those are kind of paid in advance. Now with the new option, quite simply, it's kind of moves that charge across to your Azure commitment. So it just comes directly from that. Again, cost-wise, it's going to work out approximately the same, but it is going to be a little bit more with the pay-as-you-go because of the services running within Azure. But that was literally announced on the 30th of March yesterday. So that's the recent news there. So again, lots of talking, but that does bring an end to the webinar, and the slides will be made available to you. I think maybe if you've had some questions, there might have other questions may have popped up, so we're more than happy to cover off specifically what this might mean for you and your organization. But otherwise, I hope that was useful. Thank you very much. Thanks very much for your time.